we're in this situation with COVID-19, I think a lot of our efforts have been um, directed or dedicated towards um, just addressing people's daily needs.
We just launched a mutual aid fund, which is exciting. At the same time, right, we're also seeing a lot of attacks, government, industry capitalizing off of a pandemic. One, we have major industry players that are going to the California Air Resources Board, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and other government agency, environmental government agencies, and telling them, hey, let's relax the regulations. Let's not work on them anymore. There's no point right now. There's no way we'll participate. And they've been sending collective letters. These are powerful people at the state level, right? Pushing the governor, pushing the air regulators to do that. And another way, right, that corporate players are capitalizing off of this is the industry in the region, right? The largest industry here is the logistics industry, the warehousing industry, and we're seeing them not take the appropriate measures to protect the workers, which then means it's not protecting the families that they then go into. I think today more than half of the facilities in the Inland Empire for Amazon have COVID cases. If you are a member of this community, you know that you cannot afford to not go to work. So if you're not getting paid sick leave, you are putting yourself in a risk. Workers have brought in a petition to OSHA, right, to file a complaint. So the Amazon workers are filling out a petition right now. We're working on a community petition for community folks to sign on and say, I support the workers in my community to get this, and that. Not only for their sake and their livelihood, but also for just our collective public health, right? It's a risk to our public health if we keep neglecting parts of our community for productivity and for profit. Luckily, it's been a month now. We've been able to create a little bit more of a structure and a foundation and react in a way that hopefully produces long-term change and not just this immediate reaction. Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely been a tool for them to silence and shut people out.
Personally, I am privileged to have this position. I'm not struggling to make ends meet. I don't have to go outside. People in my own family, like my father and like my brothers that are still working, they're all essential workers, having to still be in contact with folks. And so that concerns me because, two of my family members have insurance and all that stuff, but they're not the most efficient. If my dad has issues with bronchitis, he has a lot of like throat infections. So I know that, it's been because of constant exposure to not just the industry, right? Having worked for the garbage industry and before that, the logistics industry for a long time, but also where they live, right? My dad lives near the BNSF rail yard in San Bernardino, where there's tons of pollution there. One of the worst polluted areas in probably the state, right? Really high pollution numbers on Cal and Viral Screen. And then, my other brother is a warehouse worker, and he has no health protections, right? No guarantee of employment. So if he loses his job, then where's he going to find a job? It's not like he's educated like myself. But on a bigger level, I think what this exposes is really, like Andrea said earlier, the cracks, right, that have been left unfilled because of the failure of leaders and the failure of air regulators to address not only the pollution impacts, but really the health disparities that currently exist in San Bernardino and really the entire region. And the only winners in this is the corporations, Amazon, right? Amazon is still making billions of dollars. Jeff Bezos is still making billions of dollars while workers are getting no PPE, no protective wear. Workers aren't even allowed to leave, right, or get paid leave. So it's concerning, and I think this exposes, I think, a lot of the issues that have been prevailing for time now, for decades now.
For me, what it's really exposing is the like the true lack of a social net that we have that's offered to us by the state or our local governments. I mean, we had to push our elected officials to just do eviction moratoriums, which doesn't even forgive the rent, right? This is just excusing people from not paying during this time and then having like some payment plan after. I mean, this is, we're asking for crumbs here, and it just shows how little we've been able to expect from our government agencies. And so, and also I think it's exposed the disparities that exist when a virus happens. I mean, who are the people that still have to go to work, and who are the people that still have to put themselves at risk, right? And we have, I think, if anything, this for me really exposes like um, the difference in class that there is, and I think it's going to create a wider gap between our class struggle, because we're really seeing it now.
Despite everything that's going on, this is, uh, an opportunity to shift the paradigm. I think when it comes to everything that's happening, the workers, as we're seeing right now with the Amazon workers, a lot of them are upset. A lot of them are angry, and rightfully so, because they're at risk. We've seen people already pass away who have been working at Amazon because they've been exposed to COVID-19. So people are angry. People are shocked and angry. And I think um, now more than ever, folks are beginning to see how cruel companies like Amazon really are. This virus has really made Amazon workers, and really, I mean, in my own perspective, even consumers understand that we can't have convenience at the cost of other people's livelihoods. It's ultimately up to us now to continue to move that shift in the right direction, right? And push for better jobs, push for cleaner air, but more importantly, just shift the way that we do business and the way that the way that we're extractive, right? We can't continue to extract the resources. We can't continue to extract the labor from people's bodies because it's not going to work. And at the end of the day, like, this system of capitalism is going to fail. And I think this virus is showing that it's beginning to fall apart, and I think this is an opportunity for us to shift that and call for something different, because our community needs something different, something other than the logistics industry or the citrus industry or the military industry.
The question is, like, after COVID, right? Like, how do you restructure society, right? There's a lot of industries that we've been dependent on because of powers that have been able to, force those types of things for us to continue on with these industries. An industry that is toxic, an industry that is dangerous to people's quality of life and even mortality, right? I think if we were able to like identify that and realize that it's like Anthony was saying, it's an extractive industry that not just extracts from the earth, but also extracts from people's bodies. There are examples of ways that local economies work, local food systems that can work in our communities. How do we become more self-sufficient and self-sustainable? And ideally, how does that look? I think it looks by not having a cooperative model of living that isn't dependent on some of these big names. And we have some of the richest companies in our communities, right? And we don't see any of that trickling down. How do we move away from that? We're traveling so far and doing all these things, not unnecessarily, but there are things that need to change in our day to day, right? So, like, after all of this, like, how do we minimize our movement and create our local work?
There's already land trusts. There's already things where folks own land, folks own property, and sometimes they even have like communal spaces where you have landlords that aren't slumlords, that aren't like ripping people off.
Like, if workers had all of their rights, where when a pandemic happens, they have their paid sick leave and they would have insurance and they have these benefits that, that they were okay, then the risk of, slowing down production, or the risk of going slower, or the risk of not working as much wouldn't be so daunting and scary for people, because that's what holds people in, right? It's like, I think that's the big problem with like the environmental and labor movement. It's like most labor folks will think that like environmentalists are trying to shut down their work. I do want to flag, like, we're seeing benefits to the air, to the climate for sure, because of the amount of greenhouse gases, but the EJ impacts are still there, right? We still have the freight corridors moving. So even if the air looks great, there are still certain corridors in certain neighborhoods where certain people live that the trucks have not stopped.
Goes back to the paradigm shift, you know? I mean, we have to, you know, the air is cleaner because there's less cars, there's less activity, human activity. And I think, you know, in the long term, if we want to continue to see those improvements, then we just have to change the way in which we consume. These improvements we're seeing are not improvements for us, because the same people are still getting hit the first and the hardest when it comes to the impacts with this pandemic. And in addition to having the fears of living with asthma or COPD or respiratory illnesses, added with the danger of contracting the coronavirus, I think just stresses people out more, and it puts more fear into our folks, unfortunately, you know, because I think a lot of people are beginning to see the connections, right? There's people that are beginning to see that if they have existing respiratory impacts, that they're more at risk. And so it's just a double layer of uncertainty and fear that exists right now. There are lessons to be learned with our air quality being cleaner. If we shift our mindset and our cultures to be less extractive and more aware or empathetic of those things around us, right? Whether that be like other people who are less fortunate, right? People who live in frontline communities, or even just the environment itself, right? Nature itself. I think we just have to be more mindful.
Can't come into a community, completely extract from their workforce and their community, and not like give them the tools to be able to fight back it as best as possible. A lot of these facilities use temp agencies to hire on their workers. They've slashed all of those workers. So this system that we've had in our backyards that was so reliant on these temp usage systems, they like just like showed their back to them in one day with no permanence, and also the risk, right? Like these it's not worth your health, it's not worth your work, you know, your livelihood, to be put in places that are not trying to like take the most precaution. They're using the bodies and the labor in the IE for benefits of other people, and then like minimizing the protections for them. It just makes no sense. They have one part of the supply chain here and the other folks in like these corporate buildings here, and they don't see each other. It's not human.
Yeah.
So the fact that we're able to put them to see each other face to face is big. And the fact that they took retaliatory action between coworkers talking to each other, because the tech workers have been calling the warehouse workers their fellow coworkers to really like just incite that, right? So when you think about it, yeah, it's like they're not letting coworkers even speak to each other. So because, right, the Amazon model is to just separate them. These are tech workers or warehouse workers.
Yeah.
I look at, you know, you're different for me.